audio, video, and Zoom meeting application, you may type in your concerns in the chat box and a DOST NCR personnel will gladly assist you. And also for the information of all, this session is being recorded for documentation purposes. We encourage the participants to take down notes for the valuable thoughts and ideas that will be shared by our speaker. Magandang araw po muli sa lahat. Welcome to this webinar series on science, technology, and innovation purposive researches for smarter communities, with its topic on utilization of various technologies for PPE disinfection. This is part of the celebration of National Science and Technology Week 2020 with the theme of Agham at Teknolohiya, Sandigan ng Kalusugan, Kabuhayan, Kaayusan at Kinabukasan. I am Roseanne Fernandez from DOST NCR, and I will be your host for this day's afternoon session. To start our program, let us acknowledge the loving presence of our Lord through an opening prayer to be led by Mr. Jaime Sebastian Jr.
Tayo ay manalangin at damhin ang presensya ng Diyos. Panginoon, maraming salamat po sa panibagong araw na pinagkaloob niyo sa amin. Patuloy niyo po kaming gabayan sa mga hamon ng buhay at turuan niyo po kaming mas magtiwala sa inyong kapangyarihan higit sa panahong ito. Dalangin po namin na pagkalooban niyo rin po ng karagdagang pangkahusayan ang aming mga tagapagsalita upang mas maibahagi nila ng wasto ang kanilang kaalaman at bigyan mo po kami ng karunungan na maunawaan ang bawat paksa. Panginoon, bigyan mo rin po kami ng bukas na isip at puso na mas makita ang pagpapala na binubuhos niyo sa amin. Balutin niyo po kami ng inyong dakilang pagmamahal, grasya at kapayapaan. Ito ang aming dalangin sa matamis na pangalan ni Jesus. Amen.
At this point, we would like to acknowledge and recognize the presence of our resource speaker, Dr. Ramon Christian P. Eusebio, our guests from DOST regional offices and DOST agencies, also to our DOST agency partners in the preparation of this event, to DOST National Research Council of the Philippines and National Academy of Science and Technology. Also to our partners from the local government units, DepEd, state universities and colleges, and non-government associations. To formally welcome us, may I call on the Regional Director of DOST National Capital Region, Mr. Jose B. Patalinhog III.
It is my pleasure to welcome you, our guests and partners. Thank you for joining us in this session. In the past months, we have been battling a pandemic crisis that went beyond our manpower, facilities, and hospital capacities. It is indeed high time for us to capture scientific facts as we design solutions to manage and mitigate the disease. From the science community, we hope to shed some light and help our heroes in the front lines through science, technology, and innovation. Today, we will focus on Agham at Teknolohiya becoming a foundation of Sandigan ng Kalusugan. We will talk about the utilization of various technologies for personal protective equipment, disinfection to deal with the high volume of possible health hazards of PPE waste due to COVID-19 pandemic. We will be joined by Dr. Ramon Christian P. Eusebio, Chair of the Division of Engineering and Industrial Research of the DOST National Research Council of the Philippines. Allow me to remind you of our challenge of taking scientific knowledge with you to possibly impact your own communities. Thank you and good morning.
Thank you po, RD Jojo Patalinhog, for your warm message to our participants and to our speaker. To give us an idea on what the topic is all about, we prepared a short video. Let's all watch this. Thank you for that video. And now, to discuss with us the topic on utilization of various technologies for personal protective equipment disinfection, our speaker, Dr. Ramon Christian P. Eusebio, is a graduate of BS Chemical Engineering and Biotechnology at Myeongju University, South Korea. He worked as a postdoctoral research associate at the La Salle University, Manila, and assistant professor at the Engineering Science Department, UPLB. Dr. Eusebio is currently working as an associate professor at the Department of Chemical Engineering, University of the Philippines, Los Baños. His specializations include water and wastewater treatment, seawater desalination, mathematical and modeling, and membrane technology. In year 2017, he was recognized by the National Academy of Science and Technology, or DOST NAST, and given a special citation award for the NAST Talent Search for Young Scientists. He is currently an associate editor of the Philippine Institute of Chemical Engineers Journal. He is also a reviewer of Water Science and Technology, Water Supply Journal of Cleaner Production, and Journal of Membrane Science. He is involved in several projects funded by the National Research Council of the Philippines, Newton Fund, USAID Stride, and DOST PSHERT. Dr. Eusebio is the chair of Division 7, Engineering and Industrial Research of or NRCP, and he is also the current president of the Philippine Institute of Chemical Engineers Laguna chapter. He served as the president of the Organization of Filipino Scholars in Korea. He is also a member of the Society of Environmental Engineers of the Philippines, Korean of Society of Environmental Engineers, and European Membrane Society. He is also currently doing studies and different disinfection technologies for the contaminated personal protective equipment in order to reduce the demand for PPE supplies and ensures that health workers are protected without compromising their own health. Help me welcome our speaker, Dr. Ramon Christian P. Eusebio.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Miss Rose Ann, for the introduction. So I really want to thank for the DOST and NCR for having me as one of the speakers for this year's NSTW 2020. So for the webinar series, and I also want to thank Sir Patalinhu for the invitation, and Miss Iron. Okay, can you see it now? Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today, I will be discussing about the utilization of various technologies for personal protective equipment disinfection. I am Dr. Ramon Christian Eusebio, an associate professor at the Department of Chemical Engineering, College of Engineering and Agro-Industrial Technology, University of the Philippines, Los Baños. I am also the current chair of the Division 7, or the Engineering and Industrial Research Division of the National Research Council of the Philippines. And also the president of the Philippine in Laguna chapter. We are all aware that the COVID-19 pandemic is rapidly spreading across countries and regions, causing huge impact on people's lives and communities. In the first few months of the pandemic, gloves and gowns that depleted stockpiles, which prompted significant price increases and led to production backlogs of 4 to 6 months in fulfilling orders. The continuous increase in the number of cases of COVID-19, along with export bans and other trade restrictions have greatly affected the supply of personal protective equipment worldwide. It is essential to have a secure supply of PPE since it protects health workers from contracting the disease and from infecting others. The most significant challenge is to ensure that critical PPE products are sourced and allocated to frontline health workers and other responders in affected countries, especially those that are most vulnerable to the spread of the coronavirus. Supply chain disruptions for PPE are particularly risky for medical personnel as COVID-19 rapidly spreads. If not adequately protected, healthcare workers who are the frontline defense against coronavirus can infect patients or colleagues, and the need to be quarantined after exposure quickly depletes the health workforce. This is what we encountered here in the Philippines during the pandemic. Even our health workers requested a 1 week ease due to the exhaustion and increase in the number of COVID-19 patients. In this figure, you can see the global market for PPE in the health sector, which is estimated to be worth $2.5 billion in 2018. Gloves have the highest share of sales revenues at 25%, followed by suits or coveralls at 22%. Face masks and hats came in third with a share of 14%. By region, the US had the largest market share of 33%, followed by Asia and the Pacific of 28%, and Europe with 22% in 2018 based on the data from Mordor Intelligence. There were a lot of press releases in connection to the shortage of PPEs in the Philippines. In the month of April, our country is already experiencing the lack of personal protective equipment, and as you can see in these photos, our kababayans already resorted in wearing grocery and garbage bags as protection. Shortage in PPEs is not only the problem that we are facing, also the huge amount of waste that will be generated from these single-use PPEs. There's one article from Greenpeace suggesting support in producing reusable PPEs that will both address PPE shortage as well as waste issues. However, in the month of July, an article published by Manila Bulletin posted by DOH in their website citing that health workers are still struggling with PPE shortage. In response to the problem that our country during this pandemic, the University of the Philippines formed a task force that will address the looming problem of our hospital materials. The task force is focusing its attention on helping increase ventilator capacity, fabricating intubation boxes, face shields, and testing booths, evaluating and equipping a quarantine isolation center for COVID-19 positive patients, and lastly, addressing both issues of hospital waste management and PPE supply through the use of decontamination chambers. This is the task given to our team. Our team is headed by Dr. Monette Concepcion Detras, the chair of the Department of Chemical Engineering, which leads in the design of this semi-mechanized non-contact decontamination chamber that can disinfect 5 to 10 PPE set at a time. Our team has begun sourcing materials so that fabrication and testing of treatment efficiency and material integrity can progress. We also established standard protocols for PPE treatment and reuse after the PPE decontamination chambers. But we are still in the experimentation stage. But should the design and procedure prove viable, the decontamination chambers will be made available for both nearby hospitals and the established COVID-19 testing center in UPLB. In order to help health institutions in managing supply shortage, The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC, has issued contingency and crisis capacity strategies for PPE reuse. The ability to implement specific crisis capacity strategies will depend on the on-hand inventory. This flowchart can assist healthcare facility respiratory program managers in determining if their healthcare facility should operate under a crisis capacity situation. First, you need to evaluate adequacy of current N95 FFR inventory and supply chain. Some of the questions that you may ask are: first, is your current N95 FFR inventory and supply chain equal to or greater than your PPE needs? Next, are there N95 FFRs available from local healthcare coalitions and federal, state, and local public health partners that can cover your PPE needs based on your burn rate and ability to procure more PPE when needed? Also, you can use the Personal Protective Equipment Burn Rate Calculator to help you plan and optimize the use of PPE during the response to coronavirus disease 2019. Another one is to evaluate availability of other respirators in your inventory. The first thing you may ask are there NIOS, or National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, approved respirators that meet or exceed the level of protection of N95 FFRs available in your inventory or from the supply chain to cover your PPE needs? Are there NIOSH approved respirators available from local healthcare coalitions and federal, state, and local public health partners that can cover your PPE needs? Or other devices that can be used include N99, N100, and others, elastomeric respirators, and power air purifying respirators? Or you may also use of these devices includes in the conventional capacity strategies to conserve the supply of N95 FFRs. Next is to evaluate extended use of N95 FFRs. The first one that you can ask is, can extended use of N95 FFRs cover your PPE needs based on your burn rate and ability to procure more PPE when needed? So if your answer is yes to any scenario, you are not operating at crisis capacity, and you can follow the conventional capacity strategies, or if shortages are expected, you can use the contingency capacity strategies. But if your answer is no to any of these scenarios, you should apply crisis capacity strategies. Here's the difference between contingency capacity strategies and crisis capacity strategies. Contingency capacity strategies are implemented when there are expected supply shortages, while crisis capacity strategies are implemented when there are known supply shortages. In addition, for the purpose of our topic, decontamination and reuse, although not advisable, may be considered in crisis capacity situations. There are three general strata that have been used to describe surge capacity and can be used to prioritize measures to conserve isolation gown supplies along the continuum of care. The first one is the conventional capacity. Its measures consist of providing patient care without any change in daily contemporary practices. This set of measures, consisting of engineering, administrative, and personal protective equipment controls, should already be implemented in general infection prevention and control plans in healthcare settings. Next is contingency capacity. It measures may change daily standard practices but may not have any significant impact on the care delivered to the patient or the safety of healthcare personnel or HCP. These practices may be used temporarily during periods of expected isolation gown shortages. For the crisis capacity, these measures or a combination of these measures may need to be considered during periods of known isolation gown shortages. This is the contingency capacity strategies for isolation gowns. Number one is selectively cancel elective and non-urgent procedures and appointments for which a gown is typically used by health care personnel. Number two, shift gown use towards cloth isolation gowns. Reusable gowns are typically made of polyester or polyester cotton fabrics. Gowns made of these fabrics can be safely laundered according to the routine procedures and reused. Care should be taken to ensure that healthcare personnel do not touch outer surfaces of the gown during care. Laundry operations and personnel may need to be augmented to facilitate additional washing loads and cycles. Systems are established to routinely inspect, maintain, and replace reusable gowns when needed. Number three, consider use of coveralls. Coveralls typically provide 360-degree protection because they are designed to cover the whole body, including the back and the lower legs, and sometimes the head and feet as well. While the material and seam barrier properties are essential for defining the protective level, the coverage provided by the material used in the garment design, as well as certain features including closures, will greatly affect the protective level. Healthcare personnel unfamiliar with the use of coveralls must be trained and practice in their use prior to using during patient care. Number four, use of expired gowns beyond the manufacturer designed shelf life for training. The majority of isolation gowns do not have manufacturer designed shelf life. However, consideration can be made to using gowns that do and are past their manufacturer designated shelf life. If there is no date available on the gown label or packaging, facilities should contact the manufacturer. Number five, use gowns or coveralls conforming to international standards. Currently, guidelines do not require use of gowns that conform to any standards. In times of shortages, healthcare facilities can consider using international gowns and coveralls. Gowns and coveralls that conform to international standards could be reserved for activities that may involve moderate to high amounts of body fluids. Here's the crisis capacity strategies for the isolation gowns. Cancel all elective and non-urgent procedures and appointments for which a gown is typically used by healthcare personnel. Number two, extended use of isolation gowns. Consideration can be made to extend the use of isolation gowns such that the same gown is worn by the same healthcare personnel when interacting with more than one patient known to be infected with the same infectious disease when this patient housed in the same location. This can be considered only if there are no additional co-infectious diagnoses transmitted by the contact among patients. If the gown becomes visibly soiled, it must be removed and discarded. Number three, reuse of cloth isolation gowns. Disposable gowns are not typically amenable to being doffed and reused because the ties and fasteners typically break during doffing. Cloth isolation gowns could potentially be untied and retied and could be considered for reuse without laundering in between. In a situation where the gown is being used as part of the standard precautions to protect healthcare personnel from a splash, the risk of reusing a non-visibly soiled cloth isolation gown may be lower. However, for the care of patients with suspected or confirmed COVID-19, healthcare personnel risk from reuse of cloth isolation gowns without laundering among number one, single healthcare personnel caring for multiple patients using one gown, or two, among multiple healthcare personnel sharing one gown in is unclear. The goal of this strategy is to minimize exposure to healthcare personnel and not necessarily prevent transmission between patients. Any gown that becomes visibly soiled during patient care should be disposed and cleared. Number four, prioritize gowns. Gowns should be prioritized for the following activities. During care activities where splashes and sprays are anticipated, which typically includes aerosol generating procedures, during the following high contact patients care activities that provide opportunities for transfer of pathogens to the hands and clothing of healthcare providers such as dressing, showering, transferring, providing hygiene, changing linens, changing briefs or assisting with toileting, device care or use, wound care. But when gowns or no gowns are available, number five should be considered. Consider using gown alternatives that have not been evaluated as effective. In situation of severely limited or no available isolation gowns, the following pieces of clothing can be considered as a last resort for care of COVID-19 patients as single use. However, none of these options can be considered PPE since their capability to protect healthcare personnel is unknown. Preferable features include long sleeves and closures that can be fastened and secured, disposable laboratory coats, reused patient gowns, reusable laboratory coats, disposable aprons, combination of clothing. Combination of pieces of clothing can be considered for activities that may involve body fluids and when there are no gowns available. Long sleeve aprons in combination with long sleeve patient gowns or laboratory coats. Open back gowns with long sleeve patient gowns or laboratory coats. Sleeve covers in combination with aprons and long sleeve patient gowns or laboratory coats. For the contingency strategies of N95 mask, first, with extended use, N95 filtering face piece respirators or FFRS are worn for a prolonged period for multiple patient contacts before being removed and discarded, unlike conventional strategies in which an N95 FFR is used for one patient contact, then discarded. This will slow the N95 FFR burn rate to help alleviate supply concerns. And number two, N95 FFRs are used beyond the manufacturer designated shelf life for fit testing and training. After attempting the above contingency strategies and there is still a known shortage of N95 FFRs and available supplies cannot meet needs based on the current burn rate, crisis capacity strategies can be used. For the crisis capacity strategies of N95 masks, first, respirators are used beyond the manufacturer designated shelf life for healthcare delivery. Number two, respirators are used that are similar to National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health approved respirators but are not NIOSH approved and are approved according to standards used in other countries. Respirators are used that have reached the manufacturer designated shelf life but have not been evaluated by NIOSH. With limited reuse, an N95 FFRS is donned or one patient contact, then doffed and stored before being used for another patient contact for a limited number of donnings. And lastly, the use of N95 FFRS and face mask is prioritized by healthcare activity type. This guidance provides information on how to determine if and when a healthcare facility should be operating under N95 FFR crisis capacity situation during the COVID-19 pandemic and how to appropriately implement limited reuse of N95 FFRS, including the reuse after decontamination. This is the contingency strategies for eye protection. Number one, decrease length of stay for medically stable patients with COVID-19. So as much as possible, limit your time of exposure. Number two, selectively cancel elective and non-urgent procedures and appointments for which eye protection is typically used by CP or healthcare personnel. Number three, shift eye protection supplies from disposable to reusable devices. So maybe you can reuse the goggles and the other reusable face shields. Number four, implement extended use of eye protection. For the crisis capacity strategies of eye protection, first, cancel all elective and non-urgent procedures and appointments for which eye protection is typically used by healthcare personnel. Number two, use eye protection devices beyond the manufacturer designated shelf life during patient care activities. Number three, prioritize eye protection for selected activities. If the activity is not that important, maybe you can just give him emphasis to the more important activities. Number four, consider using safety goggles that have extensions to cover the side of the eyes. So maybe just make sure that it is covered. Number five, exclude healthcare personnel at increased risk for severe illness from COVID-19 from contact with known or suspected COVID-19 patients. And lastly, designate convalescent healthcare personnel for provision of care to known or suspected COVID-19 patients. These are the waste treatment that we usually employ for our medical waste. So sterilization describes a process that destroys or eliminates all forms of microbial life and is carried out in healthcare facilities by physical or chemical methods. Steam under pressure, dry heat, ethanol gas, hydrogen peroxide gas plasma, and liquid chemicals are the principal sterilizing agents used in healthcare facilities. Sterilization is intended to convey an absolute meaning. However, some health professionals and the technical and commercial literature refer to disinfection as sterilization and items as partially sterile. When chemicals are used to destroy all forms of microbiological life, they can be called chemical sterilants. These same germicides used for shorter exposure periods also can be part of the disinfection process. Disinfection, on the other hand, describes a process that eliminates many or all pathogenic microorganisms except bacterial spores on inanimate objects. In healthcare settings, objects usually are disinfected by liquid chemicals or wet pasteurization. Each of the various factors that affect the efficacy of disinfection can nullify or limit the efficacy of the process. Cleaning is the removal of visible soil. Examples are organic and inorganic matter from objects and surfaces and normally is accomplished manually or mechanically using water with detergents or enzymatic products. Thorough cleaning is essential before high-level disinfection and sterilization because inorganic and organic materials that remain on the surfaces of instruments interfere with the effectiveness of these processes. Decontamination removes pathogenic microorganisms from objects so they are safe to handle, use, or discard. Let's focus on disinfection. Unlike sterilization, disinfection is not sporicidal. A few disinfectants will kill spores with prolonged exposure times, from 3 to 12 hours. These are called chemical sterilants. At similar concentrations, but with shorter exposure periods, maybe 20 minutes for 2% glutaraldehyde, this same disinfectants will kill all microorganisms except large numbers of bacterial spores. They are called high-level disinfectants. Low-level disinfectants can kill most vegetative bacteria, some fungi, and some viruses in a practical period of time, maybe less than 10 minutes. Intermediate level disinfectants might be acidal for mycobacteria, vegetative bacteria, most viruses, and most fungi, but do not necessarily kill bacterial spores. Germicides differ markedly, primarily in their antimicrobial spectrum and rapidity of action. As you can see here in this figure, the most resistant one is the bacterial spores, and the least one is the lipid or medium-sized viruses. So as you can see, the viruses or the uh, coronavirus SARS-CoV-2 is that easy to eliminate. But in uh, in decontamination or disinfection, you need to apply the appropriate procedure. This is the chemical disinfection uh, prescribed by the Department of Health. This is how to use a strong chlorine solution from 70% chlorine powder. So first, make sure you are wearing extended PPE. And then you may add 10 tablespoons of high test hypochlorite to 20 liters of water in a bucket. And then you can stir well for 10 seconds or until the high test hypochlorite has dissolved. And then after that, wait until 30 minutes or 45 minutes before using before use, and then make sure remove infectant for the disinfection. Critical items confer a high risk for infection if they are contaminated with any microorganism. Thus, objects that enter sterile tissue or the vascular system must be sterile because any microbial contamination could transmit disease. This category includes surgical instruments, cardiac and urinary catheters, implants, and ultrasound probes used in sterile body cavities. Most of the items in the category should be purchased as sterile or be sterilized with steam if possible. Heat-sensitive objects can be treated with ethanol, hydrogen peroxide gas plasma, or if other methods are unsuitable, by liquid chemical sterilants. Germicides categorized as chemical sterilants include greater than or equal to 2.4% glutaraldehyde base formulation, 0.95% glutaraldehyde with 1.64% phenol or phenate, 7.5% stabilized hydrogen peroxide, 7.35% hydrogen peroxide with 0.23% peracetic acid, 0.2% peracetic acid, and 0.08% peracetic acid with 1 hydrogen peroxide. Liquid chemical sterilants reliably produce sterility only if cleaning precedes treatment and if proper guidelines are followed regarding concentration, contact time, temperature, and pH. The activity of germicides against microorganisms depends on a number of factors, some of which are intrinsic qualities of the organism, others of which are the chemical and external physical environment. Awareness of these factors should lead to better use of disinfection and sterilization processes and will be briefly reviewed. Number 1. Number and location of microorganisms. All other conditions remaining constant, the larger the number of microbes, the more time a germicide needs to destroy all of them. Reducing the number of microorganisms that must be inactivated through meticulous cleaning increases the margin of safety when the germicide is used according to the labeling and shortens the exposure time required to kill the entire microbial load. Researchers also have shown that aggregated or clam cells are more difficult to inactivate than monodispersed cells. The location of microorganisms also must be considered when factors affecting the efficacy of germicides are assessed. Only surfaces that directly contact the germicide will be disinfected. Number 2. Innate resistance of microorganisms. Microorganisms vary greatly in their resistance to chemical germicides and sterilization processes. Intrinsic resistance mechanisms in microorganisms to disinfectants vary. For example, spores are resistant to disinfectants because the spore coats and cortex act as a barrier. Mycobacteria have a waxy cell wall that prevents disinfectant entry, and gram-negative bacteria possess an outer membrane that acts as a barrier to the uptake of disinfectants. Implicit in all disinfection strategies is the consideration that the most resistant microbial subpopulation controls the sterilization or disinfection time. That is, to destroy the most resistant types of microorganisms. Number 3. Concentration and potency of disinfectants. With other variables constant, and with one exception, which is the iodophores, the more concentrated the disinfectant, the greater its efficacy and the shorter the time necessary to achieve microbial kill. Generally not recognized, however, is that all disinfectants are not similarly affected by concentration adjustments. Considering the length of the disinfection time, which depends on the potency of the germicide, also is important. Number 4. Physical and chemical factors. Several physical and chemical factors are influenced disinfectant procedures. Temperature, pH, relative humidity, and water hardness. For example, the activity of most disinfectants increases as the temperature increases, but some exceptions exist. Furthermore, too great an increase in temperature causes the disinfectant to degrade and weakens its germicidal activity and thus might produce a potential health hazard. An increase in pH improves the antimicrobial activity of some disinfectants, but decreases the antimicrobial activity of others. The pH influences the antimicrobial activity by altering the disinfectant molecule or the cell surface. Relative humidity is the single most important factor influencing the activity of gaseous disinfectants or sterilants, such as ethanol, chlorine dioxide, and formaldehyde. Water hardness reduces the rate of kill of certain disinfectants because of divalent cations. In the hard water interact with the disinfectant to form insoluble precipitates. Number 5. Organic and inorganic matter. Organic matter in the form of serum, blood, pus, or fecal or lubricant material can interfere within the antimicrobial activity of disinfectants. Most commonly, interference occurs by a chemical reaction between the germicide and the organic matter, resulting in a complex that is less germicidal or non-germicidal, leaving less of the active germicide available for attacking microorganisms. Chlorine and iodine disinfectants, in particular, are prone to such interaction. Alternatively, organic material can protect microorganisms from attack by acting as a physical barrier. Number 6. Duration of exposure. Items must be exposed to the germicide for the appropriate minimum contact time. Multiple investigators have demonstrated the effectiveness of low-level disinfectants against vegetative bacteria and viruses at exposure times of 30 to 60 seconds. The exact times for disinfecting medical items are somewhat elusive because of the effect of the aforementioned factors on disinfection efficacy. Certain contact times have proved reliable, but in general, longer contact times are more effective than shorter contact times. Lastly, biofilms. Microorganisms may be protected from disinfectants by production of thick masses of cells and extracellular materials, or biofilms. Biofilms are microbial communities that are tightly attached to surfaces and cannot be easily removed. Once these masses form, microbes within them can be resistant to disinfectants by multiple mechanisms, including physical characteristics of older biofilms, genotypic variation of the bacteria, microbial production of neutralizing enzymes, and physiologic regions within the biofilm. Bacteria within biofilms are up to 1,000 times more resistant to antimicrobials than the same bacteria in suspension. Although new decontamination methods are being investigated for removing biofilms, chlorine and monochloramines can effectively inactivate biofilm bacteria. In this table, you can see the list of disinfectants approved for SARS-CoV-2. This is listed in List N, which is the disinfectants for use against SARS-CoV-2 or for COVID-19. So the most important part of this one is the active ingredient. You need to make sure that your disinfectant has sodium hypochlorite. So this one is the most common in our disinfectants available in the market. Okay, if you want to access the complete list of disinfectants, you can access it using the link given below. This is the proposed protocol for PPE disinfection and reuse, which is proposed by Derike et al. This year 2020, entitled Rapid Review of SARS-CoV-1 and SARS-CoV-2 Viability, Susceptibility to Treatment, and Disinfection and Reuse of PPE, particularly filtering face piece respirators, or FFR. So first, we have the new PPE, and after using it, it will undergo first inspection and sorting. So PPE set aside for potential disinfection. So you need to look or inspect which used PPE can be disinfected for reuse. Okay? So careful inspection of PPE, including straps, and any soiled or damaged PPE should be discarded. Only intact PPE should be restored and undergo treatment. Okay? After the inspection and sorting, it will undergo treatment. So there are 3 treatments here, and just choose whatever appropriate. You have the UVGI, heat treatment, you have the chemical disinfection. So after the treatment, it will undergo reinspection and sorting. So this is after the disinfection, and you need to carefully inspect again the PPE, especially the straps of the um, filtering face piece respirators. Okay, so any PPE with any sign of damage must be discarded. So it should be disposed after. So if it already damaged, only intact PPE should be packaged for reuse after being appropriately marked as PPE derived from disinfection, including the number of the disinfection cycle. So it's very important that you need to label the treated PPEs. So you need to put that it already undergone treatment, and especially the number of cycles. So for example, it already undergone three disinfection processes, or you already used it for 3 times, so you need to put it in the label of the treated PPEs before using it. So the next person that will use that know how many times it was already used. Okay, but for FFR, for filtering face piece respirator, it's very important that the same person should use the same FFR. Okay, so the last one after the inspection and sorting, it will undergo fit checking. This is for frontline staff to ensure that FFR passes fit check prior to use, and any disinfected PPE fit properly. So any sign of a suboptimal fit, disinfected PPE to be immediately discarded. So if it doesn't fit well, it should be discarded. This is very important for medical personnel. Okay, so this is for the proposed protocol of De Reich et al. This one is the consolidation of different studies, uh, which was consolidated by De Reich et al. In their rapid review paper. So as you can see here, they used UV. So for Fisher, he used UVC at 260 to 285 nanometer with irradiance of 0.55 milliwatt per area or per centimeter squared. So this one is estimated of around 3 log reduction for N95. And for Hailing Law is utilized UVC for his studies, and UVA. So for UVC, he used 254 nanometer, and for UVA, he used 365 nanometer. So for UVC, he achieved more than 6.7 log reduction at 1048 millijoule per centimeter squared, and for UVA he achieved 1.0 log reduction at 292 millijoule per centimeter squared. So as you can see here, UVC is better in performance as compared to UVA. So for Smith, he used UVC as well at 254 nanometer, but he got a different result because they said that UVC did not inactivate the virus from the N95 samples. So they mentioned that it is very hard to imagine a realistic scenario where the healthcare workers would face this degree of mass inoculum, because it's very dangerous for our health care workers to use this N95 if the virus was not inactivated. So for their studies, UVC was not effective. For Ratzinar, Shumate, the last row, they use UVB at 280 to 350 nanometer. This study aims to demonstrate the SARS-CoV-2 inactivation by sunlight, which does not include the UVC spectrum. So in these studies, you can see that most of them use UVC. So it can be concluded that uh, or the highest efficiency for the inactivation of the virus is using the UVC as compared to UVA and UVB. This one is for the heat treatment, still under the Reich et al. Rapid review. So you can see here, the first one is the study by Erswald. So he used 56 degrees Celsius at 30 minutes. So to achieve 5.0 log reduction. This one is the heat treatment details and time of inactivation. So he changed the temperature to 98 degrees and he achieved just 2 minutes for the time of inactivation, but still getting a 5.0 log reduction. So the first column, by the way, is for the inoculum and the condition, the operating condition used for each study. Okay, for Betayjat, so he used different media. He used cell culture, nasopharyngeal samples, and also serum. And then they started 56 degrees Celsius at 30 minutes and achieved 5.9 log reduction. And then after that, he changed the time to 15 minutes. So he lowered the time to 15 minutes and then raised the temperature to 65 degrees Celsius to still achieve the greater than 5.9 log reduction. And then also for other media. Okay, for others, they started with 56 degrees Celsius and also 30 minutes, and they just play with the temperature and the time of inactivation. But as you can see at the lower part, the last row by Wang, so he uh, he he used even lower temperature. He started at 37 degrees Celsius, but as you can notice here, it reached 48 hours just to achieve 6.0 log reduction. So, but still they said that it still have ineffectivity of the inactivation of the virus. So at 37 degrees Celsius, the 37 degrees Celsius, we are not sure for the inactivation of 100% inactivation of the virus. So for even at 47 degrees Celsius, still 24 hours to achieve log reduction, and still ineffectivity still remains. Okay, but for 56 degrees Celsius, which is very common for the heat treatment, um, it reached 30 minutes to achieve 7.0 log reduction, as well as 60 degrees Celsius at 15 minutes of achieving 7.0 log reduction. This one is the conclusion made by the Reich et al. For disinfection of surgical mask. They said that UVG or UV germicidal irradiation would not be appropriate for disinfection of surgical masks due to their folded construction. So as you can notice, there are some folded parts of the surgical mask. So it's very important if you use the UV disinfection or treatment, all parts of the PPE should be reached by the UV. Okay, so that's why Derek et al. Came up with this conclusion, I think. So, thus, heat treatment would be the most readily available option, likely at similar levels of as FFRs, although 60 minutes at 70 to 75 degrees Celsius would seem more appropriate to maximize thermal virucidal activity deep within mask folds. So, he suggested to use heat treatments instead of UVGI. But using heat treatment, you must be very cautious because if you increase the temperature high enough, maybe the integrity of your material of the surgical mask can be damaged. So especially if you prolong the the time of exposure using the heat treatment. For disinfection of isolation gowns, Derek et al. Suggested to use heat treatment. They said that heat treatment would be recommended due to their size and folds, as wiping with chemical disinfectants would be laborious and prone to failure. So they said that, or they are looking into some folded parts of the isolation gowns, that it's very difficult to reach by UV. So, and it's very large, that it's very laborious if you just use the wiping method. Okay. And they also said that they are not aware of the disinfection studies undertaken on isolation gowns, but now there are some attempts that um, treatment or disinfection of these gowns, okay, for possible reuse. And then they said that heat treatment at 60 to 65 degrees Celsius for 90 minutes would be advisable, as the plastic polymers that often make up isolation gowns tend to have relatively low maximum operating temperatures, and higher temperatures would likely lead to permanent structural damage. So as I've said earlier, that the integrity of the material is very important. So you need to be cautious in using higher temperature. So because in also in gowns, they have some plastic polymers that can be affected by this kind of treatment. This one is for the disinfection of eye protection. They suggested, Derek et al. Suggested that this should be immersed for at least 10 minutes in a chlorine solution at a conservative dose of 5,000 milligrams per liter, or 5,000 ppm, which is also the same concentration suggested by DOH. Okay, which would account for the gradual reduction in chlorine concentration throughout the day. Okay. Alternatively, in the absence of any signs of soiling, this could be thoroughly cleaned with an 80% ethanol solution for at least 30 seconds. So now we are using 70% ethanol solution. So it's also okay. But I think you need to increase the time of wiping of your goggles or eyewear. So this one, 80% ethanol solution for at least 30 seconds. So it's just also like washing your hands. You need to wash your hands for at least 30 to 1 minute to ensure that all virus were killed or removed. Okay. Afterwards, the goggles or eyewear should be rinsed well with warm water to remove the disinfectant solution, which could otherwise damage the equipment or cause skin irritation for the wearer. So if you want to reuse it, you need to rinse it well with warm water before using it, because it can cause irritation. Okay? In addition, as goggles and other eyewear can be made of different materials, we recommend testing to make sure the disinfectant will not damage the equipment or the lens of, for example, fogging of the lens, before implementing a chemical disinfection procedure. So as I always say, it's very important to consider the integrity of the material. So it's not just killing the virus, but also maintaining the integrity of the, or not damaging the material of your PPEs. For the disinfection of face shields, they recommended the use of the same procedure used in eyewear. So these are made of thin plastic and would likely be damaged if treated at temperature greater than 60 degrees Celsius. So they are looking into the damage of the plastic used in face shields. Okay, so it's not recommended to use heat treatment for this one because of the uh, plastic material used for face shields. Okay. So the best approach may be to clean face shield using the same procedure as for eyewear. However, face shield usually have a foam-like material or thicker plastic band on the area that is in direct contact with the face, which may be difficult to thoroughly clean with chemical disinfectants. So the face shield that we used before, they usually have this thick foam-like material that is very difficult to disinfect, especially using chemical disinfectants and also by UV. But now we have this just like the like an eyewear for the face shield, so it doesn't have foam-like material anymore. So I think the disinfection of this kind of face shield would be uh, easier than the face shield we used before. Okay, so and they may be constructed from a wide variety of transparent plastic with different sensitivities to UVC effects. So it's very important to consider the effect of UVC. It is therefore unclear whether UVGI can be used once or repeatedly without discoloration or fogging due to UV damage, and testing would be recommended. So before reusing it, you need to subject it first to different experiments to see if there are fogging due to the damage brought about UV treatment. As an example, there are different contamination method used by different companies. This one is used by 3M. For the contamination method, they use ethylene oxide or formaldehyde, ionizing radiation, microwave, temperature above 75 degrees Celsius, or using autoclave or steam. They also use ozone, and they also use VHP, or the vaporized hydrogen peroxide. These are the products from 3M, and as you can see in this table, there are different respirators. We have 6000 series, 6500 series, and you can see in the first column the different disinfectant that can be used for this kind of products. So most of the disinfectant can be used for almost all products except for Perox RTU. It cannot be used for 6500 series and FF400 series FF. Okay, but others, like for example, the disinfectant cleaner concentrate 23A, and even the super Sanicloth germicidal wipes can be used for all kinds of 3M products or the respirators. This one is the parts of the respirator that can be used for the decontamination procedure. So cleaning and disinfection method, for example, for the 603 filtered adapter, you can just use wiping or spray or soaking. Okay, for the pre-filter assembly of 603 and 501, and also for the cartridge assembly, you can just use the wiping method. Just wipe outside surfaces with clean damp cloth soaked in solution. But for pre-filter pad, you don't need to clean it or disinfect it, because after the use, you need to dispose it immediately. This one is another study by Schwartz et al. Entitled "Decontamination and Reuse of N95 Respirators with Hydrogen Peroxide Vapor to Address Worldwide Personal Protective Equipment Shortages During the SARS-CoV-2 Pandemic." As you can see here in the figure, they have different places inside the chamber for the disinfection of N95 using hydrogen peroxide vapor. So you have here different indicators, biological indicators, and different places. And also you have the rotating dispersion nozzle at above, and then on the side, you can see the exhaust to hydrogen peroxide vapor unit. So basically, Schwartz et al. Use hydrogen peroxide vapor to decontaminate N95 mask. This one is another study using hydrogen peroxide plasma conducted by Ibanez Cervantes, entitled "Disinfection of N95 Mask Artificially Contaminated with SARS-CoV-2, okay, and escape bacteria using hydrogen peroxide plasma impact on the reutilization of disposable devices. So as you can see here in the mask, they put a different inoculum. Okay, so there are inoculation points, and then after that they have artificially contaminated the N95 mask, and there's also inocular absorption. Then after that, they put it inside the bag, sterilization bag, and subject it to the standard disinfection process using hydrogen peroxide. And after the disinfection process, they culture the bacteria, or they see if there are some reduction in the virus, okay, or the inoculum that they used from the N95 mask. This one is another study from Fisher et al. Entitled Effectiveness of N95 Respirator Decontamination and Reuse Against SARS-CoV-2 Virus, which is published in Emerging Infectious Diseases. So they utilized UV light, dry heat, ethanol, and vaporized hydrogen peroxide for the disinfection of N95 mask. For letter A, they observe the decrease in the virus titer or media at different time. For letter B, it's more of the integrity of the mask and also the fit factor. So it's as I mentioned, it's very important that fitting on personnel, medical personnel, should be assured that it fits well before using it. So letter C is the kill rate of the virus at different integrity fit factor. Okay, so you have the UV, the VHP, the heat treatment, and the ethanol. Okay, this one is the fit test provided by 3M. You can use 3M Sweet Fit Test Solution, and you can also use 3M Bitter Fit Test Solution for this kind of N95 mask that they have. These are the products of 3M as well. So for the testing of this mask, you can see this apparatus for the fit test. You can use the bitter and the sweet solution to see if the treated mass is damaged or not. So if you taste the bitter taste, it means that the mass is somehow damaged. So the testing should be done prior to usage of the N95 mask. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, you can ask during the open forum. Thank you.
Thank you po, Dr. Eusebio, for that wonderful topic. And now for our open forum, we encourage everyone to direct your questions in our chat box and kindly send it to everyone. You may also click the raise hand button for an opportunity to speak during the open forum and wait for the host to call your name. So while having po the discussion kanina, may mga nag-send na rin po ng questions, Dr. Eusebio. One of it is, for cloth disinfection, how many percentage of chlorine must be added to eliminate the virus? Or what are the other chemicals that can be used for the disinfection?
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Loud
Narinig
and
ba?
clear
Okay.
pa.
For yung na-mention ko before, the concentration is around 5,000 ppm. So, yung mga disinfectants natin available sa market ay okay lang naman siyang gamitin, no? They are effective, pero you need to make sure how much or kung gaano kataas yung kanyang hypochlorite concentration. So meron akong nung pumunta ako sa market, halos lahat din ng mga naandon na disinfectant, wala siyang nakalagay. Meron na ako nakita na isa, no, around I think 7% yung kanyang hypochlorite concentration, sodium hypochlorite, no. So pwede niyo siyang i-dilute to 5,000 ppm para maging effective siya. Yun yung pangkaraniwan. So in our study, tinitingnan din namin kung ano yung okay na concentration talaga. Kasi meron tayong minimum pero hindi tayo usually what do you call this one? Hindi tayo doon nag-ooperate kasi mahirap na hindi assured tayo. Minsan kasi medyo sumasablay. So kapag naandun tayo sa minimum concentration ay baka may mga hindi kasi tayo nakakasiguro usually na 100% talaga. So kaya tayo nagsasabi 99.99%. There's no such thing as 100%. So lagi tayo nagkakaroon ng uncertainty, no? So doon tayo lagi sa medyo mas sigurado tayo. Hindi tayo doon nag-ooperate doon sa minimum. Pero in our case, gusto naming malaman ano ba yung minimum, no, na pwede tayo mag-operate, pero still doon tayo sa safer kasi ito ay gagamitin ng ating mga medical personnel. So dapat assured tayo na safe siya. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you po, Dr. Eusebio. Another question po. UV lights, especially the portable ones, are available na po sa online. Is it really effective in killing bacteria and other microorganisms? And do you recommend this to use as disinfectant po?
Okay. So meron tayong mga available na UV lights. Actually, I have here mini UV light. No, so pero maano ko siya hindi ko siya ganoon na nagagamit kasi as I've mentioned, so kailangan mong matagal sa isang place na i-expose, okay? Para mamatay yung virus. Okay? So pwede naman siya magamit, just make sure na ang UV na nakalagay doon sa bibilhin niyo ay mas okay ang UVC, no? Na-mention ko doon sa aking presentation na we have UVA, UVB, UVC. So yung ano naman nasa spectrum siya. So ang pinaka-effective talaga na nakita natin sa ating mga studies ay UVC. Okay? So just make sure na yung bibilhin ay UVC.
Sir, another question po from Miss Marites of DepEd. Can we use water and detergent in cleaning and disinfecting an ordinary face shield?
Yes, you can. So sa bahay namin dito, so we have the protocol, no? So after lahat, no, galing sa labas, may nakahanda na. So may water with disinfectant. So even yun nga soap na detergent. So just make sure kasi bumubula siya. So yun yung nag-aano kasi nakakapatay din talaga. So may nakahanda na doon and then ilagay niyo lang doon lahat before kayo pumasok. So just make sure na nasasubmerge lahat ng parts. For example, yung face shield niyo lahat submerge. Okay? Ang nagiging problem lang with this one ay kapag nagkakaroon tayo ng fogging. So sometimes this topic ay pwede tayong mag-reuse. Okay? Pero may effect siya dun sa integrity ng material as well. So sometimes nagiging malabo siya. Minsan kasi na-mention ko kanina, yung ating face shield before meron siyang yung parang foam. So yung foam na yon mahirap siyang i-disinfect kasi once na ilubog mo siya sa isang solution, kailangan mong ma-assure na pumasok talaga dun sa loob, na-absorb nung iyong foam. And then hindi mo siya kaagad siya masusuot kasi kailangan mo siyang patuyuin enough time para maging mas okay siya na air dried, no, kasi hindi siya pwede sana sa heat treatment kasi baka ma-damage pa lalo siya. Okay? Pero ngayon yung ating mga face shield, yung parang para na lang siyang goggles, no? So mas okay siya kasi mas napupuntahan noong ating solution yung mga parts na kailangang i-decontaminate or i-disinfect. So okay lang na gamitin yan.
Thank you, sir. Another privately message po na question. For further understanding, why is there a need to wear a face shield? Is face mask not enough? And how does the face shield protects?
Okay. Siguro hindi ako sa medical pero um, ang face shield kasi supposedly yan ang nagpo-protect sa face mismo natin, especially ang ating eyes. Okay? Ang ating mask is for sa lang na mouth and sa nose. Okay? So meron ako na experience lately na para bang bawal yung half shield. Okay? I already have the face mask pero dapat daw full. Pero actually, kapag naka-full ka, okay, full yung iyong face mask, kaya ka nagpo-full kasi minsan wala kang mask, face mask. Okay? So, ang tendency is, kaya kailangan i-full, hindi pumunta kapag nagsasalita ka, hindi pumunta ng malayo yung, kunwari, yung iyong saliva or kung ano man, no? So, pang-protect siya, pang-barrier. Okay? Yung face shield. So, basically, yung face mask is para dito sa ating mouth and nose. Okay? Para hindi natin malanghap kung ano man yung virus, kung ano man yung naandun sa environment natin, and dun sa mouth naman natin, hindi natin kung tayo contaminated. Kung tayo ay infected, hindi natin ma-share yung infection sa iba. And kasi isa sa mga pwedeng daanan is yung eyes, that is for face shield.
Thank you po, Dr. Eusebio. Another question po from Ms. Joanne. Enough na po ba ang 70% isopropyl alcohol in cleaning the face shield?
Okay. So as I've mentioned din earlier ay yun naman yung natin usual na ginagamit. It's enough to use 70% alcohol. Even for yung pag disinfect natin sa ating kamay, no? Ang nga lang is kung wiping ang gagawin ninyo, just make sure na medyo kasi kapag 80% is 30 seconds, no? So siguro kailangan yung paulit-ulitin lang siya ng wipe. Okay? So mga 30 to 1 minute ay for wiping kung 70% alcohol. So meron tayong mga studies na nag-iiba-iba rin. Nag-iiba-iba rin yung percent na kailangan daw. Pero pinaka-common or pinaka-acceptable is 70% alcohol.
Another question po from Miss Estelita. Can we use salt with water or vinegar to disinfect virus or the bacteria?
Okay. Actually, it's not enough to use just salt and vinegar kasi hindi talaga siya nakakapatay, no? So para rin siyang yung meron kasing mga nagsasabi na magmumumog ng yung warm water with salt. So saline solution just to parang nagtatanggal lang siya ng minimum pero hindi siya totally na napapatay. Okay. So yun yung knowledge ko about the salt. Pero hindi siya talaga kaya wala tayong mga ganong strategies or option for the disinfection. Okay?
Sir, another question po for the mask. Yung po bang satin mask na merong pocket for 2.5 pm filter, okay po ba yun as protection?
Yung yung 2.5, very fine yun. So, masyadong maliit na nga talaga yon. actually hindi siya kailangan. Kasi like yung nung nagkaroon tayo ng volcanic eruption ng for example yung Taal, no? Napaka-fine nung mga ano nung kanyang yung kanyang sizes. Okay? So, yung 2.5 kailangan nating mag-mask ng time na yun kasi yun yung makakasala. But this one, sabi nga, 'di ba, ang hindi nagtatalo pa rin sila kung this one ay uh, through air or yung talagang ano ba to, kung hanggang may distance lang siya na nararating, no? So hindi ganon kaliit siya. So kaya yung mga surgical mask natin ay okay lang. Pero kapag do sa mga eruption, hindi siya kaya na i-filter. Pero this one, okay lang siya. Maganda nga yun sa 2.5 kasi mas maliit siya. Just make sure na nakakahinga ka ba, no? Na mas comfortable for you to breathe.
Thank you, Dr. Eusebio. For our last question, what is your way of knowing if an object or something is infected or not infected with a virus? Or what technology do you use to find out if something is infected or not?
Naku, parang mahirap yatang sagutin niya. I think more of sa medical, even the medical personnel siguro medyo may hirapan kasi you need to undergo test para malaman kung infected ka talaga. So we have the rapid test na hindi rin ganun 100% sure. So sometimes they have the rapid test and then kapag naging positive ka, they still need to undergo the RTC, PCR test. So yung kailangan mo ng i-PCR siya, no? You isolate and then the PCR. We have here in UPLB yung sa PCR. So doon pa lang namin nalalaman kung infected talaga siya. And then we also have like in our case, ito naman mga PPEs, meron kaming mga indicators na ginagamit kung napatay ba talaga yung yung virus na inilagay namin. Actually, we are not using virus because in the Philippines, itong SARS-CoV-2 ay hindi pwede pa siya talagang gamitin. So, ang ginagamit usually is yung mas matindi pa. So, nakikita natin doon sa pinresent ko kanina, actually, ang pinakamadali ring patayin is yung mga maliliit na virus and then middle. Ang yung mga spores, yun yung mahirap. So, ang ginagamit usually natin sa mga experiments is yung mas matindi dun sa coronavirus. Para kapag napatay natin siya, it means na we can conclude na mapapatay na rin yung coronavirus, yung SARS-CoV-2.
Thank you po, Dr. Eusebio, for answering po all the questions. And now the success of this event will not be possible without the presence of our speaker. To award the Certificate of Appreciation, allow me to read the citation. The Department of Science and Technology National Capital Region awards the Certificate of Appreciation to Dr. Ramon Christian P. Eusebio for sharing his invaluable expertise as a resource person for the forum titled Utilization of Various Technologies for Personal Protective Equipment Disinfection, held on November 25 via Zoom in celebration of the 2020 National Science and Technology Week. Once again, thank you po, Dr. Eusebio.
Thank you very much.
Salamat po. And now, to formally close this afternoon session, may I call on the Assistant Regional Director for Technical Operations Division of DOST National Capital Region, Engineer Arman P. Bionat.
I would like to thank our guest speaker, Dr. Ramon Christian Eusebio, for presenting the existing demand of the PPEs, the safety procedure in using these PPEs, and the different technologies for the disinfection of the personal protective equipment. All available technologies were explained and presented well. The ultraviolet germicidal irradiation, sterilization using steam, and disinfection using chemicals. The Department of Health must consider using these safety procedures and technologies to reduce the cost of hospitalization for each COVID-19 patient. Private hospitals can also use these safety procedures and technologies. I would like also to thank the participants from other DOST regional offices, the local government units, academe, and the private sector for attending this very important presentation. And lastly, to the Pamamarisan cluster for organizing this series of seminars. Thank you po sa inyong lahat.
Thank you po, Engineer Brionat. And now we would like to take this moment for a photo opportunity with our speaker and participants. May I request everyone in the webinar room to please open their videos and smile to the camera. Once again, we want to thank everyone po who spend their time to attend this webinar. We hope that you learned a lot of lessons from our speaker. So count lang po tayo ng at least 20 seconds para po ma-capture yung mga ating participants for this afternoon session. Last 10 seconds mo. Smile lang po tayo sa camera. For some po na hindi pa naka-open ng video, request lang po kami to please open their videos po. Salamat. Last 5. Thank you po. For the evaluation link, you may, meron po kaming ipa-flash na QR code sa inyo pong mga screen. And you may also refer po sa link na isa-send po namin sa chat box. And this may be accessed until 10 p.m. today. So, para po sa ating certificates, kindly answer po the evaluation form hanggang 10 p.m. po ngayong araw. And now, if you want to know more about this year's National Science and Technology Week virtual exhibit, let's all watch this video. For the National Science and Technology Week virtual exhibit, ito po yung makikita natin once po we click the link of nstw2020.dost.gov.ph. And to access po itong ating virtual exhibit, you may first to register para makapasok po sa loob. And ito po yung makikita yung interface ng buong NSTW virtual exhibit. So from there po, merong site map, meron pong lobby, plenary hall, exhibit hall, regional event, and resource center. So from that tabs po, pwede nyo po siyang i-click and makikita nyo po yung mga activities per tab. So dito po sa plenary hall, may mga live po tayo dyan ng mga sessions with our Secretary Fortunato de la Peña. And sa exhibit hall po, makikita po natin yung mga TARPs for the activities and events. Also for the regional event. And now po, for the events and activities of regional offices, click lang po natin yung regional event. For example, this one po. Then, meron po kayong makikita for all the regional offices of DOST. Sample po natin is yung DOST NCR. Need po natin mag-register. You may choose po yung as first timer. At makikita nyo po ang mga events, activities, and webinars na kinokonduct ng DOST NCR. From there po, you will see the 4Ks once po we enter the room. So, ganyan po siya pag pumasok po kayo sa loob. Meron pong lobby, may directory, at pwede po kayong mag-scroll. So, para lang po kayo nasa loob din ng event center. So from there po, meron po tayong mga section for the theme ng National Science and Technology Week, the 4Ks, kalusugan, kabuhayan, kaayusan at kinabukasan. Below are the attached schedule of events and webinars per theme. So from there po, makikita nyo po may mga pre-recorded webinars din po related to the theme. So pwede po kayong pumasok, pwede rin kayong umakyat dun sa taas or bumaba po dito. Makikita nyo rin po yung iba't ibang products and also yung mga na-assist po na clients ng DOST NCR. Same through with the other regions po. Makikita nyo rin po yung kanilang mga activities, events, and mga clients po na natulungan nila. With that po, we want to encourage everyone to register and visit the virtual exhibits, especially DOST regional events, and you may share this information to your colleagues and friends. For further announcement, para po sa ating webinar series, tomorrow will be the last session for the Science, Technology, and Innovation Purposive Researches for Smarter Communities with the topic of examining blended learning experiences for higher education institutions with our speaker, Dr. Jasper Vincent Alontaga from DOST National Research Council of the Philippines, Division of Governmental Education and International Policies. We encourage everyone who registered on our webinar to enter the virtual room 30 minutes before the session starts. And you may check your email for the instructions and guidelines for this session. So ito po yung QR code for the evaluation. Pwede nyo po yung i-scan and you will be directed po sa ating evaluation form. And you may also check po the evaluation link sent to our chat box. And this can be accessed only today hanggang 10 p.m. po. Once again, on behalf of our Regional Director, Mr. Jose D. Patalinhog III, and our Cluster Director, Mr. Oscar B. Sevilla Jr., we thank everyone who participated in this webinar, especially to our speaker, Dr. Ramon Christian P. Eusebio, and to our participants. This has been your host, Roseanne Fernandez, wishing you a blessed day and see you tomorrow.
We live in an era of constant change. Innovations are so common in this day and age. To